Okay, let's create another component here. So as we've been saying, component-based design calls for small components that you build together to create bigger components. What we're going to do here is create a button component. So I'm going to open up the files here, and I'm going to right-click on the components folder and choose New File. And I'm going to name this button with a capital B .js. And then here for the starter code, I'll use the RAFCE option, and that will be the starter code for me. And what I want this to do is this is just going to be a single element in our JSX. It's just going to return a button element. So what I'm going to do is replace that with a button element like so. And there's my closing button tag. And then I'll go ahead and split these apart. And we'll define some props for this component. So right there, I go to my arrow function for my component function, and what these props get passed in as an object. So I'm going to put curly braces there, and we're going to destructure that object, and we're going to say that there's going to be a label prop, and then we'll have another prop, and we'll call it on button click like this. Okay, so what we're going to do, this allows your component, our button component in this case, to be flexible, because if we use it in one case, we might want the label to be one thing, but if we use it in another place, we may want a different label. So what we do is we make it a prop, and that allows the parent component to determine what the label should be. Okay, so what we'll do here is in between the opening and closing button tags, we'll bounce into JavaScript code. So I put the curly braces there, and I want to display whatever the label prop is right there. Okay, now the other thing we're going to do inside of our button is underneath that prop right there, where we're displaying the label prop. Let's go ahead and add an image element. And remember, you need the / there before the greater than sign, and we want to go ahead, we'll use the same picture as before. So I'm going to set the source equal to, and then I'll use it in the same way. We'll import that image as logo, so I need to import that image, and then I'm also going to set the width here to 30 pixels like that, and I'll set an alt attribute, and I'll just make it say React logo like that. Okay, there we go. And now I do need to import that SVG file. So I'm going to go back up to the top where the imports are, and I'm going to import logo from, and then quotation marks. I need to go up a folder. It should show me, it's not giving me the IntelliSense, so I'll have to type it in like that. And then, so here's what our button component is going to start out looking like. Now, what I want to do is when this button gets used, we don't know how the parent component that's using this button component wants it to behave. That's the purpose for this prop right here. So we want the parent to determine what happens when the button gets clicked. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to the opening button tag, and I'm going to add an on-click attribute. Okay, and remember that attributes in JSX have to be camel case, so that's a capital C there. And then I'm going to refer to JavaScript code, and we're just going to simply call that on button click prop. So I'm going to set that like that. Okay, so this is going to be the basic version of our button component. So let's try this out now. Save your changes, and now let's put it somewhere in our app. Let's put it inside the sample component. So that's just a good place for us to test stuff out here. So I come back over here to the sample component, and I'm going to place that button component right here underneath the other button that we had. Now, this is a capital B button. This is our component. So right here, I'm going to add a button element, but with a capital B, and then I'm going to put the / and the greater than sign like that. Okay, I need to import the button. I see up top it didn't automatically get imported for me, so I will have to import it here. And I can do it like this: import button from and then in quotation marks, I can do dot / because it's in the same folder. So I have to do dot / and then button like that. And you don't need to put .js, that's implied. So that'll import that component for me. Okay, if I save my changes here and then go back over to the browser and reload it, we can see there's our button, but I see there's no label, and that's because I forgot to pass that prop in here. So I'm going to go back to my sample component where I'm using an instance of the button, and I'm going to add the props for it. Okay, so as you know from the first project that we did, is to pass props into a component. When you have an instance of a component, you treat them as attributes. So here is my label. And by the way, if I hover over this, it should show me the props. So I can see that it's got a label prop and an on button click prop. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and type in the label as if it were an attribute. And I'll just call this button 2, I guess, for the heck of it, because we already have button 1 on here. And then I should pass in the on button click handler, and that's going to be the click handler that gets placed on the button. So here what I can do is I can pass in an arrow function. So I'll just go ahead and do that, put in an arrow function right there. I actually don't need the curly braces, so I'm going to delete the, I deleted one too many curly brace. Okay, what I can do here is I'll just make it console log something like click, just for the heck of it. Okay, and I think that should be good enough. Let me rearrange this here so you can see that whole line. So I'm going to close the other stuff here. Okay, so there we have it. Now we placed an instance of our button component on here. Let's see how everything looks now. So save the changes. Everything recompiles automatically. It looks like it compiled successfully. So I can Alt-Tab over to the browser, and there is my button component. And then when I click on it, we get our click handler that we passed in from the parent component. So this props allow your components to be flexible. I can pass in a label here. Maybe if I'm using the button in a different place, I'd want a different label. Here, I can also pass in the on-click handler from the parent. So here, when the button gets clicked, I might want to do one thing, but if I'm using this button component somewhere else, I may want it to do something else. So I pass in a different arrow function. Okay, now we get to reuse these components. So what I want to do here is let's go ahead and copy this line down. So put your cursor at the end of that line, where we added our custom button component, and then do Alt-Shift down arrow, and that will copy the line down. Let's change the label to button 3 right here. And what I want to show you is that you don't necessarily have to use an anonymous arrow function right here. What you can do, I'm going to remove that. So there was the arrow function that we were using, but what you can do is you can write a named function. So I guess before I fill those curly braces in, I'll define a function here. I'll just define it as an arrow function. I'll just call it some function just for the heck of it. And then I'll set it equal to an arrow function like that. And then this is going to be I'll just make it say console log, and I'll make it say button 3 click. Okay. I don't know. It doesn't really matter but what I've got here is a function that has a name, and the name I gave it was some function. Okay. So what I can do is I can pass that name in for the on button click prop here, something like that. Okay, now I just wanted to show you that some people will do this. So if you just have a quick one-liner, you'll probably use this approach. So here, if your arrow function has just one quick line of code that you can fit nice and easy right here, then you can go ahead and use an anonymous function like we are here. But sometimes your functions get to be quite big in many lines of code, and you don't want to put them in line right here in your JSX. It makes it really hard to read. So in that case, you'd write a function with a name and put all your lines of code in it, and then refer to it by name when you're using it in the JSX code. Okay, let's run this real quick. So I'm going to save that and then Alt-Tab back to the browser. And here, when I click on button 3, there's my sum function running. All right, so this is a very common thing to do. Instead of using HTML button elements everywhere, you can define your own custom button component, and then that adds to the look and feel of your site. This is going to be our default button now. It's our own custom component. So yeah, let's go ahead and style this thing a little bit here. So we'll go over to index.css, and let me see, I gotta go here, and then index.css. Now I'm just gonna paste the code in for this, so you don't watch me fumble typing it, but we'll just add some code that will style the button. Okay, here it is. You can pause the video and type that in if you want. I'm using a Flexbox to center things and just adding a border and a background color and stuff like that. But go ahead and you can do that or something else if you want to. I'm not the best designer, but if I go ahead and save my changes here, you can see that we're targeting button elements. That's what our selector is. So it's going to target all button elements. And now all of our buttons look like that. So here's the HTML button, but here's our custom buttons right here. Okay, so, but they're all button elements, so they're all picking up that CSS style. Okay, what I want to show you now is that you can create what are called CSS modules, and that way you can write CSS code that only applies to a component. So these are called CSS modules. So what we do to do that is let's define a module for this component. So I'm going to right click on the components folder and choose new file. And then we want to name this. It's going to start off with the same name as the component that we want to style. So capital B button. And then we want to do .module .css. Okay, now it's got to have a .module.css file extension in order for this to work here. So go ahead and hit enter. So you should just use class selectors inside these CSS modules. So I'm going to define one called promo with a dot there, and then split the curly braces apart, and we'll just make the background color be midnight blue. Like that, and then I'm going to go back over to the button component, and the first thing I need to do is import that module file. So I'm going to go right here and type in import. Now you can call this whatever you want. You get to name your own imports, but usually what I've seen, people just name it as styles. Okay, and so we'll call it styles, and then from let's see here. So now I need quotation marks and then ./ and then button.module.css like that. Okay. And now what I can do here is I can apply styles from that module, and it looks like this. So I'm going to go to the opening button tag inside of our button component here, and I'm going to add an attribute, and it's going to be class name. Okay. Now normally in HTML we use the class attribute, but apparently in JSX there's a problem with just using the class attribute. So anytime you want to assign classes to elements, you have to use class name instead. Okay, so that's another thing that could trip you up. You'll be inclined to just type in class, but it has to be class name for JSX code. Okay, I'm going to use curly braces here after the equal sign because I'm going to be referring to our styles JavaScript variable. And what I can do here is type in styles. That's what we imported. It has a .promo class, so I treat it like it's a property of the styles object. Okay, anyways, if you go ahead and save that, and then, ooh, I got an error. What's my error here? Okay, it looks like I have a typo here. It's saying it can't figure out what button.modules.css is, and that's because I added an S there that I didn't need. Okay, so I'll go ahead and save my changes. Hopefully it'll compile now. I'm going to scroll down here. Okay, so I can see that it recompiled successfully. Go back over to the browser, and now our button components are picking up the styles in the module. Okay, now interestingly enough here, I'm going to show you something. So all of these styles that we put inside of this module are only going to be used for components that import this module. So if I go back over to my sample component and try to put that promo class on our regular button like that. So here I'm going to go find that first button, or the button element before we created our component button, and I'm going to set the class name equal to promo. It won't work. So the cool thing about these CSS modules is it allows you to apply styles to a component without it affecting everything else on the website. So it allows you to scope your CSS code to a single component. So here, if I go back here and save this, I'll see that it's not going to be blue, it's going to stay green. So the styles that we put inside of a module are only going to apply to the components that import that module. So it's a nice way to prevent your CSS code from affecting everything on your website. Let's actually make our button component even more flexible here. So I'm going to go back over here and let's add another prop to our button component. So I'm going to go up to the props here, and I'm going to add one called is promo. Okay, and now what this will allow us to do is you can pass in whether it shows up as blue or green when you declare the button in the parent component. So now we've added this other prop right here. And then what I want to do is I want to come back down to where I'm applying the promo class from our module. And I'm going to do this. I'm going to say if is promo is truthy, then I'm using the conditional operator right here. Then we'll apply styles.promo. And then after that, I'll put the colon. And here I'll just put a pair of empty quotation marks, meaning that we don't want to apply any classes here. Okay, so this line right here is a JavaScript expression. It's the conditional operator, or some people call it the ternary operator. And hopefully by now you're comfortable with this. But it means that if this is set to true, then we go ahead and use this. We want to apply that promo from our module. If it's not true, then we're just going to leave it as an empty string, meaning that we're not applying any classes to this button element right here. Okay, now if I save my changes here and then go back over to sample component, I have another prop that I can pass in here. So I'll just use our button 3 right here. I'll go ahead and add actually, this line's going to get to be real long here. So if you have an element that has a lot of attributes and you want to break it up into multiple lines, this is how you should do it. You want to put each attribute and its value on its own line and indented like that. So here, there will be the label prop. There's our button click prop that we're passing in. And then here, I'll add the is promo. And I'll pass that in as, now I could do it as JavaScript and pass it in like that. So I'm passing in a Boolean, a true Boolean in. So that technically is a JavaScript variable that I'm passing in. But when you're passing in Booleans, true or false, you can also just use quotation marks. So either way will work just fine. Okay, so what this means is that button 3 should be blue because it's a promo button. And we're determining that by passing it in as a prop from the parent component. But button 2 should be green. It'll be the default. So if I go ahead and save that, and then Alt-Tab back here, you can see that button 3 is a promo button. So anyways, this is real common in React. You can define a component for things like buttons and other small bits and pieces, and then you use those all over the place, and that will make your website nice and consistent. So all of our buttons can be, have this image and the promo class and whatnot. So component-based design.